This is a brief overview of the artist Joseph Cornell and his use of found objects to create nostalgic imagery and identity in his own artwork. Uh, Joseph Cornell's work gives the viewer something to identify with. It defines an approach to creation that feels very private yet relatable. The juxtaposition of various curiosities lends to the characteristic of art as a visual journal. This portrays an array of opposing ideologies while also letting the work speak for itself at times. By examining selections of these compositions, the viewer is capable of interpreting the work in a variety of ways. Spectators are incapable of identifying fully what the intention of the artist might have been with the composition. Rather, the work seemed to metaphorically ask the question of the viewer. Cornell's piece entitled Dovecote American Gothic, 1954–56, gives off a hypnotic aura. It entrances the viewer as an obsession with organization and at first feels unified. The ambiguous spheres are, however, disconnected in their placement through the diorama. Some are pressed against the walls of the compartments, while others are placed in front and are somewhat simmered. This brings up the idea that the spheres might not be cemented or assigned in placement, however they might be allowed to move freely throughout their individual spaces. The shape resonates as a reminder of the sphere's presence. A lot of Joseph Cornell's work is untitled or has been given a title after his death. Um, so this is another piece called Untitled, but it is titled Caravaggio Boy Compartmented Box, and I don't actually think Joseph Cornell gave it this title, but Caravaggio Boy Compartmented Box enters the realm of the figure while still maintaining a level of mystery as the previously mentioned work, Dovecote American Gothic. The compositional arrangement is very similar and the use of the sphere is still intact. The image of a boy is shown repeated in harsh contrast with the heavily saturated blue background. The ethereal portrait emanates from each cubicle with eyes fixed toward the viewer. The primitively crafted box houses the childlike purity of the subject and, in turn, a feeling of divinity. Joseph Cornell was a really seclusive, very private kind of man. His artwork really shows that. A lot of it he actually made in his basement, and he didn't really come out. He's actually considered an outsider artist because he was never really trained or learned to do art in the way that we sort of define it. So he sort of just came up with this method of making these compartments and these arrangements himself. So another portrait that Joseph Cornell did, and this isn't really a traditional sort of approach to a portrait, but the work is called Penny Arcade Portrait of Lauren Bacall. Um, this portrait displays the image of a young woman, presumably Lauren Bacall, which it is, displayed in her own individual wood frame, which is separate from the larger surrounding frame that envelops the rest of the piece. She's placed directly in front of the center of the work, and smaller versions of her image are twice repeated. Dominance of her image, and more obviously the title of the work, both bring about the idea that this could be Cornell's way of paying homage to this woman. Conclusions such as this may or may not be true. The intrigue of Cornell's compositions is that this information is often left private, thus burdening them with the inescapable comparisons to a diary. So Cornell, his work sort of, to me, definitely resonates with this sort of private, very, very introverted lifestyle that he lived. The artist has a definitive way of displaying his compositions as physical subject matter that is contained within the space. This reads as Cornell's way of attempting to destroy the imagery barrier between art and life. And a lot of people see work like this, like found object work, and think that it's not art because this is just something you found. And a lot of Cornell's work is like that, which I think is a good thing to talk about, because a lot of it he'll find at like thrift stores or used bookstores, and he'll go in and he'll tear, birds and collage materials out of them, and it's really not anything that he's creating, but the way that he's arranging the material is what makes it his artwork. And a lot of people think that well, he's not really coming up with these images himself. He's arranging other people's images, and I think it's a bit of an ignorant view, because thinking about art as a parallel to life and thinking about making your artwork as simple or as complex as you want to really sort of changes the way that you should view art, I think. Artists like Joseph Cornell and Marcel Duchamp really changed the way we should view art as more of a free act of expression. You can really create whatever you want to. So, another one of Cornell's works is Untitled, or Pharmacy, circa 1942. It compartmentalizes shelves of glass jars housing an array of small objects. There doesn't seem to be any methodology for why each jar is placed beside another jar. However, each jar appears to be holding similar small items. The work bears the unmistakable likeness to a medicine cabinet. Most of the objects displayed in the work are organic substances, but the presence of gears and other man-made substances is adequate reasoning for the viewer to abandon the notion that the work is an homage to nature. And a lot of Cornell's work invites a sort of inquiry about it, and there's a lot of different avenues you could go down in trying to explain what it might be about, because it is very personal and it is very diary-like. So we might never really know the extent to what his work means, because it might be something that Cornell kept to himself, because he was a very seclusive man. So in closing, Cornell works in a variety of materials, however does not portray a traditional style of art making. Through his conceptual imagery, the artist relays information pertaining to the natural world and the spiritual world. He gives the viewer a small amount of concrete information and uses a unique form of art making using dioramas. This method embodies most of his work. Upon examining the bulk of his work, we are left to wonder why he chose to arrange his pieces in such a way. The work is at sometimes very innocent, and other instances could be called convicting, depicting an obsession with organization to the point where the images seem finite in their existence. Cornell embodies a different way of thinking about art. The work feels very complete in their organization because of the exact placement of everything. By displaying his art in such a way, Joseph Cornell opens up new doors to an array of creativity and the birth of conceptual ideas.